Hey everybody, this is Mike with Free Roaming Photography, and I'm discussing today proper aperture to use for wildlife. Which aperture should you use to photograph wildlife properly and effectively? And really, it depends. It's not a, one size fits all kind of thing. Most people would say get a wide aperture, f4, f5.6, and call it a day. That's what you want to do. Other people swear by something like f8. And there's even some instances where I photograph wildlife at f16, and of course I'll tell you why. But point being, different occasions call for different settings, and it's not just a general blanket rule. So here in Jackson Hole, there's no shortage of opportunities. As such, every encounter is going to be very different than the previous one, and as such, they're going to need different settings depending on, amount of light, distance, things like that. For close-up portraits, if the animal is filling at least most of the frame, I tend to go as open as I can, something like f4, f5, 6. What that does is that helps to isolate the animal from the background and really give it that dramatic pop and add that depth that you're looking for from really nice portraits. Now, this could potentially blur any distracting elements, but you don't really want to rely on that. You want to remove those distracting elements yourself by composing and kind of moving around if you can, and make sure that the animal is the focus of the image and not like a branch sticking into the side. Also try to keep the focal point on or as close to the animal's eye. That's what you always want to be in focus because that's instinctively where people are going to look for connection. They're going to try to connect with that image by looking right at the eye because that's just what we do as humans. We look to the eye to try to establish a connection, whether it's another person or an animal. So you definitely always want to try to get that eye as close to the focus as possible, ideally always in focus. So what if the animal's not filling the frame? Well, if the animal is far away, I don't like to walk out to it. What that does is that potentially stresses out the animal. In addition, it's just disrespectful. It's disrespectful to the wildlife. It adds stress to their day that they don't really need. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. So if you're walking out to them and they start trying to walk away, that's energy they wouldn't have had to spend. Or especially if they have to start getting defensive. So instead, what I like to do is I try to compose more of a landscape shot that kind of gets their whole environment with them as more of an accent in one of the lower corners. I personally love these opportunities. I love getting them because what that does is it puts the animal in a sense of place. It kind of gives them, more of an environment for them to be seen in rather than the close-up portrait where you can't really tell what's around them. In these instances, it's easy to follow the rule of thirds. You can put them down in the lower and the left or the right, and that just depends on which way they're facing. So if they're facing right, for example, I would put the animal down in the lower left so they're looking across the image. Why at the bottom? Because we read images like we read pages in a book. We read from left to right and from top to bottom. So having the animal in what would normally be just a landscape shot, it makes for a powerful addition, and revealing it at the bottom adds more power to the image. Whereas if it were in the top, the viewer would have no reason to keep reading through the image. So you would basically be giving away all your really interesting scenery at the top, and that would leave really an empty bottom. So putting them at the bottom kind of gives the viewer something more to read through. So since I would be composing this like a landscape shot, I'm going to also set my aperture to f16, and that way everything's going to remain crisp throughout the scene. If the shutter speed allows it as well, that's also depending on light. If the light's low, you can also find that f16 is causing too slow of a shutter speed, and that might cause the animal to blur, in which case, you've got a ruined shot. If the shutter speed is getting too slow, I'll drop it down to something like f8 or f11, and that way, that buys me a little bit extra padding for that shutter speed. And obviously, you'd want to crank up the ISO a little bit to compensate. So I hope that helps. If you are visiting Yellowstone or Grand Teton National Parks, I am available for private photography workshops. I will take you out, give you my expertise, help you find all the wildlife we can, or landscapes, and or both, depending on what you're looking for. If you want more information on that, the link is in the description to my website. And please like and subscribe, share any remarks or questions you have in the comments below, and happy trails.